Welcome back. By now you have learned how your pension is structured and the choices you have with it at retirement. We will now explore how this vote will affect you. We have a two-proposal vote coming in June. The primary proposal is for an increase of 0.5% per year for 8 years, for a total of 4%. After the build-out period, this 4% will carry on indefinitely, making the total member contributions 12%. The contingent proposal only comes into play if the primary proposal fails. This proposal would be half of the primary proposal. You would still increase 0.5% per year, however, it would only total 2% over the next 4 years. From then on, your contributions would be 10% per year. If either of these proposals passes, the increase will take effect January of 2015. It is important to answer both questions on the ballot. The 4% option is the primary proposal. This is a yes or a no vote. In order to pass, 65% of the voting membership needs to approve the proposal. If the majority is achieved, the vote passes and the 2% option is null and void. If the 4% option fails, the 2% option comes into play. Once the 2% option is in play, the same rules apply. 65% of the voting membership needs to approve the proposal. If either option passes, then the employers statewide need to vote on the passing option and approve it by 51% or greater. Once this is achieved, the passing option will take effect starting January 2015. If the 2% option fails, neither option is counted and there will be no change to the pension. The committee has heard comments along the lines of, why doesn't the city split this 4% so the member pays an additional 2% and the city pays 2%? While that is a valid argument, however, FPPA already tried this approach. Here's why it didn't work. As you know by now, the original design of your pension is a maximum of 50% base salary after 25 years of service and at least age 60. This was written into the Colorado Revised Statutes when the plan was created. Nothing more than this is guaranteed. Also written into law was the 8% member and 8% matching employer contributions. In order to change what the city of Denver pays in, you have to look bigger than just the city and the fire department. Denver Fire is one of over 200 departments that participate in the statewide defined benefit plan. That means there are over 200 different jurisdictions that match what their employees pay in. When the FPPA was seeking the legislation to hold a vote, they looked at an employee-employer split option. However, there was strong opposition from organizations that represented the jurisdictions around the state if there was language included that required them to pay more into your pension. When the FPPA looked at the reality of would this legislation pass or would this legislation fail, it was clear that if they chose the route to have the employers pay more, it would have likely failed the legislative process. The only option that representative organizations would support was the option we have today, one in which the jurisdictions bear no financial burden. In fairness of the opposition, though, after 2008, the majority of the jurisdictions took a financial hit as well. Jurisdictions have a tendency to not bounce back financially as quickly as our pension plan can for several reasons. Because this is something that involves jurisdictions from around the state, this is not something our union can negotiate in our next collective bargaining contract. Our collective bargaining rights only extend to Denver Fire and the City of Denver. This should put to rest any concern that the city itself can go back later and reduce what they pay into the plan. That would have to be a legislative change with support from jurisdictions statewide. But compared to other pension plans across the nation, the 8% Colorado jurisdictions have to pay is lower than average. There is little concern for a statewide change. The committee has also heard concerns like, why did the FPPA make it easier to pass this vote by changing the way the votes are tallied? Well, the reason is simple. This is a much more common way to run an election. You wouldn't run a presidential election by casting an automatic no vote for every citizen that doesn't participate. Why penalize those that chose to vote by counting those that chose not to as a no? This way, every vote counts. It has nothing to do with making it easier to pass this particular vote. It is simply bringing the process in line with the norm. Another question often heard by the committee is this vote for funding a cost of living adjustment or shoring up the pension? The FPPA's official response is twofold: to increase the plan's ability to pay a cost of living adjustment and decrease the likelihood that benefits will be reduced and/or the retirement age increased. So what does that mean? It simply means if the base benefit is fully funded and there is extra money in the actuarial account, we could get a cost of living adjustment larger than previously issued. It also means we have a greater likelihood of keeping the pension plan we have today should there be another stressor on the plan. Think back to this. Remember that today's surplus is smaller than it was prior to the tiered multiplier being voted in 2000. Also remember the actuarial account is responsible for funding the base benefit and past cost of living adjustments, building money for a rainy day, and where the future cost of living adjustments are issued from. It could be described as the plan's checking account for all intents and purposes. When your personal checking account runs low on money, you should slow the rate of your spending. When the plan's actuarial account runs low, the board takes the same action. 2008 took a large chunk of money out of the actuarial account, shrinking its surplus. This put the plan in a rough situation. It still had to pay its fixed expenses no matter what, but it had to slow down on cost of living adjustments going forward in an effort to rebuild its rainy day funds. However, with as bad as 2008 was, the plan never became actuarially unsound. Therefore, the pension space benefit does not need shoring up. This becomes a situation where cost of living adjustments are lower than they were in the past, and our rainy day fund is much smaller. You can see how the decrease in surplus funding affected the account by looking at past cost of living adjustments. Over the last 33 years, cost of living adjustments averaged 2.39%. Over the last 10 years, they have dropped to an average of 1.43%. And over the last 3 years, they have only averaged 0.75%. By design of the plan, cost of living adjustments are issued as funds will allow. Because of that, they cannot be guaranteed. Now that you know how the funding of the plan works, you should see why this is true. Keep in mind, the maximum cost of living adjustment that could be given in a single year is the greater of the Consumer Price Index, or 3%. Since the new hire plan does not have an escalator clause like the old hire plan, this becomes our pay raise in retirement. We could wait for the market to do well in hopes that our surplus money would continue to grow, or we could decide to contribute more to the plan and increase the likelihood of a cost of living adjustment and help to restore our rainy day fund. If you have concerns about putting that extra money into your pension, just remember that any money you put in over your career, you will get back in the form of a defined benefit. Should you pass away before you recouped all of your own contributions, that money plus 5% simple interest will be paid to your beneficiary in one lump sum. You may be asking yourself, why do I need to be concerned? I have other retirement accounts and investments and can use that extra money now for other things. This is true. This is why at the beginning of our first video we made the statement, we are not financial advisors. We cannot and we will not give financial advice. Each person's financial situation is different, and giving financial advice without a license is both illegal and unethical. The committee has always encouraged members to speak with a trusted financial advisor. Good advisors will act as a fiduciary and look at the totality of your situation and make recommendations on what is best with your money. Keep one important thing in mind when looking at your own big picture. Your pension plan is mandatory. It is something you have to participate in, unlike other investments such as an IRA or a 457 plan. Those are supplemental investments and cannot be compared to a defined benefit plan such as ours. Talk to your advisor about your pension. They will incorporate it into your retirement future along with anything else you may have. Know that the FPPA has the same fiduciary duty to your pension that a good advisor has to your own personal finances. Let's compare the different types of investment accounts. This chart shows a comparison of a defined benefit plan such as ours to a defined contribution plan. While IRAs and 457 plans are not defined contribution plans, the pros and cons associated with them are very much alike. So much so that this chart can be used to describe the risk associated with them as compared to a defined benefit plan such as ours. The only thing that needs to be changed is this. There are no matching employer contributions in your 457 or IRA, since these are supplemental elective plans. In fact, 24 out of the over 200 departments in the statewide defined benefit plan are called reentry departments. These departments used to be part of the statewide defined benefit plan originally. Members of those departments decided they could do better on their own in a defined contribution plan and left the statewide defined benefit plan. For all of the risks associated with a defined contribution plan, these members decided it was worth an additional 4% reentry fee to again be members of the statewide defined benefit plan. That's right, the reentry members of these departments are already paying 12% and are set to pay up to 16% should the 4% option pass. That reentry fee was assessed so the rest of us that have been members of the plan the whole time are not subsidizing those that weren't. This brings up the concept of risk management. FPPA is providing us the opportunity to add additional funds to our retirement to reduce the likelihood our pension would be stressed in another market crash. If you have a 457 plan or an IRA, the investment risk is solely on you. You do not have the luxury of sharing your risk in a plan with over 6,000 people and over $1 billion balance sheet. This doesn't mean you can't be successful with other investments. Several people are. It just means you don't have a guaranteed benefit for life, as your risk profile is different. With that, let's talk about plan funding. As of January 1st of 2013, the plan was 97.9% funded. This does not account for the excellent performance of the market in 2013. We won't know that number until about July, but because of market volatility smoothing, only a modest improvement in funding is expected. But this is good news. It means we will likely be closer to 100% funded. If you are interested in the actuarial studies, they are available on FPPA's website, typically by July of each year. With all of this information, the FPPA can say that the plan is actuarially sound. To us, that means the plan is stable. That said, going into 2008, we were 119.4% funded. This overfunding gave the plan a large rainy day fund and allowed for larger cost of living adjustments to be given. After the stock market crash of 2008, the plan's lowest recorded funding level was 96.4%. This equated to a 23 percentage point drop in our plan's assets. The actuary concluded that the plan currently uses around 87% of its funds available to pay for the current benefits. With funding levels at 119.4% at the start of 2008, no problem. With funding levels at 97.9% at the start of 2013, that only leaves about a 10 percentage point surplus to weather future economic storms, issue cost of living adjustments, and consider allocations to your SRA. Though FPPA has changed the way some of the plan's investments are managed, long-range projections could be concerning when taking into consideration the greater market risk and how narrow our margin of funding is today. In a report by the independent actuary, when talking about the plan's long-term risks, stated, the board should give added consideration to the plan's ability to sustain adverse experience into the future. They project with a 10-point decrease in plan assets, the funding ratio of the plan would be taken down from its 2013 figure of 97.9%, right to the level where almost 100% of the plan's funds are used on the base benefits alone. That would mean cost of living adjustments would likely be frozen, and there would be little, if any, rainy day money left. With a large enough drop, it could put us in a position where safeguards would need to be enacted to protect our pension. Mind you, 2008 was not out of the ordinary. Major market corrections have happened in the past and will continue to happen into the future. Nothing continues to rise indefinitely. When looking at the U.S. economy as a whole, many economists are concerned that another market correction could be possible in the next few years. Couple that to the actuary's concern of existing plan risk, and there is a valid concern that the plan could become actuarially unsound in the future. Since the inception of the plan, there has never been an instance where it has been actuarially unsound. In fact, the plan has done so well that several benefits have been added to your retirement without the need for more money from the members. The board has never been in a position where they had to enter crisis mode and enact safeguards to protect the plan. Enacting safeguards simply means stripping away the added benefits until the unfunded liability can be paid back over time. Since this has never happened before, it is unclear whether or not they would come back to the members asking for a vote for more money to protect the plan. When we asked this to the FPPA, their response was, there is no requirement under the law that requires the board to hold a vote. It would be up to the board at the time to determine how to proceed. It is unknown if a future board would want to use the election process, which is typically very time-consuming, at a point where the plan is in a crisis-type situation. If the plan becomes unsound, the board has discretion on what actions to take within the safeguards. There is no specific order cited within the current statutes. Simply put, the board could act unilaterally to protect the statutorily written pension of a maximum of 50% of your base salary after 25 years of service and at least age 60. This is the only thing that is guaranteed in the time of a funding crisis. The board would make every attempt to enact these in the best interest of what we currently have, and to ensure that when we retire, we continue to have the best pension possible. They would only take what is necessary to pay back the unfunded liability, but the changes to your pension cannot be predicted, since there is no way of knowing how big the unfunded liability would be. After the safeguards have been enacted, they then could come back and ask for more money. Keep in mind, though, it could take a much larger sum of money to not only mitigate the crisis, but also restore the benefits that were stripped away, as you would have to make up for compounded losses. This has never happened in the history of the pension. That is the gist of how this vote came about. Please join us for part 2 showing you what would happen if this vote were to pass or fail.